pray. Saturday told me what to say. Sunday gave me the power to mind. Let my little light shine. Everybody. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. One more time. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Let it shine. This is your big finish. Let it shine. Let it shine.
Chairman Buckley, thank you for the introduction. It is really nice to see such a great celebration today. It was really exciting to witness the casting of the electoral votes, especially to witness the casting of electoral votes by 4 women electors for our first female nominee. The portrait that we're about to see is such a well-deserved tribute. It will serve as a reminder of New Hampshire's tradition of female leadership. It will serve as a reminder of Dudley's legacy, her being the first woman elected to the council, also a state rep and a congressional candidate. Dudley's work has never stopped. She continues to be an unyielding advocate for the people of New Hampshire and a role model for all young women who aspire to serve and make a difference. And perhaps I can close up by recounting the following. Early in my governorship, I placed a call to then State Senator David Pierce. And apparently David was in his car driving with his 2 daughters. And so he very rightly did not pick up my phone call because he was driving. But his daughters realized it was me. They could see the caller ID on the screen. And they said, "Dad, the governor's calling you." And he said, we'll pull over, I'll take it in a minute. And he called back. But in the meantime, one of the girls said, "Dad, did you ever think of running for governor?" And he said, "Well, sometimes people talk to me about it. What do you guys think?" And one of his daughters said, "No, you can't, Dad. No, you shouldn't." And he said, "Well, okay, but why?" I said, "You're not a girl." We didn't count everybody when we were founded, but our founders did believe that every generation of Americans would get better and better at it, and that we would move people in from the margins into the heart and soul of community, democracy, economy. That's what our work in New Hampshire has always been about. That's what the work of our country is about. And that's what pioneers like Dudley W understood, that you go forward, you do things that maybe are unusual at the time. Maybe you do things in a way that people aren't used to having them done from time to time. But every time you do it, every time you push forward, every time you take a few comments about rocking the boat, you're making progress and you're making a statement about the fact that the boat belongs to everybody. So, Dudley, thank you so much for everything you've done. To the entire portrait committee, thank you for all your work to ensure that Dudley's legacy endures. And more than anything, thank you, Dudley, for inspiring the rest of us.
Can you raise your hand if you've known Dudley prior to 1976? See, note that I didn't raise my hand. Now, I knew who she was, because in my high school library, I would go up there every day and read all the newspapers, and I would see the stories about her fight as a legislator against aerosol analysis. But for more than issue after issue, I would see her name, and I would see her picture. But then in October of 1976, when I was 16 years old, I'm in the middle of this crowded, crazy state convention that we were having, and Walter Mondale had spoken, and the big new Brzezinski had spoke. There were all these people. I was kind of like milling around as any 16-year-old who was obsessed about politics, and I could feel something. And I would go like this, and about where the state flag is, I saw what 16-year-old Ray Buckley saw as a combination of Marilyn Monroe and Eleanor Roosevelt, all in one. There's a picture in here that I did not expect to see that is with Joanne Simons. And she passed away a few years ago, but she loved Dudley as much as any human being has ever. And she gave love to many of us. And Joanne was the state party chair when I graduated high school and gave me my first job. And she was a phenomenal role model, and I think of her constantly in my current job as the state party chair. If you ever have two best friends like Dudley and Joanne together, you know that the things that they did were just amazing, and it made me so proud to be a witness of their work.
I have kind of a number of fond memories, but one of them involves the staffing Dudley when she was running for Congress. And this is 1984, which was either a long time ago or not very long ago. But what struck me is one evening I was at an event that she was doing at a social club in Manchester. And she was speaking about why she was wanting to run for Congress on the side of the social club that was for men only. And the only time women would go into that room would be to bring the drinks in as the wait staff. And think about what that is like, to imagine having to walk into a place where you're not welcome as a general rule because of your gender, and to stand before this group of men and to make the pitch on why they should vote for you to represent them in the Congress of the United States. And that was one of the little everyday acts of courage that I think people sometimes today can't appreciate in a world where we have an all-Democratic congressional delegation, and we've known the experience of having female speakers and female chief justices and female Senate presidents. But the governor had it right when she said that in so many ways, Dudley opened the doors for everybody. We're in this chamber where, right on that chair 3 right there sat down, for the first time when Dudley 40 years ago was elected executive councilor and walked into this room and took her place at the table opposite Governor Meldrum Thompson. She was the first woman who had a place at the table and wasn't here just to wait on the table. And I think what we've seen for every woman who sat there, for every woman who lives in a better world, in a world where your horizons are brighter, at least in New Hampshire, Dudley is an inspiration. And Raymond's right that Dudley is really important for every 4th grade girl or women, to see women in this building in positions of power and honor and respect. It's really important for every girl in the state, but it's also really important for every boy in the state.
Yes.
And, I don't want to speak on behalf of my entire gender, but I will say this, that it's really important to have people in leadership like Dudley, like the 4 incredible electors we had today in Bev and Terry and Carol and Dudley herself, and also the governor, to help us all lift the burden of misogyny off the backs that we have to carry around as men, and to help create a loving community where everyone is valued. Thank you, Dudley, for being you.
and it was a pleasure to get to know them. The Dudley daughters, Morgan and Rebecca, were such a pleasure to get to know and very helpful. Rebecca served as the point person for me, and when you're working on a portrait, of course, what you're doing is very important, but in the equation, but you can only do as good a job as the cooperation that you get from the other side gives you. And so it was a real pleasure to work with people who get it, is the best way I can put it. Several weeks later, we were in this very room working on the commission. And as has been mentioned, there are tours that come through, fourth graders, getting their sort of introduction to local government, how it ticks, what makes it tick. And when they came in, Dudley and I paused and gave them our attention and engaged them when they asked us what we were up to. But more or less, Dudley and I just sort of watched, enjoyed the scene, 20 or so kids. And I noticed the whole time Dudley was wearing a very warm, very broad smile on her face. And at the time, I remember looking over and thinking, I wonder what's going on, what's behind that smile. And I thought, well, it could be just the sight of children, their energy, their innocence, maybe the thoughts of her own childhood, her own children, grandchildren. That could be a good reason for a smile, I think. The other might be that these kids were getting an introduction to government and they might one day participate. That's an inspiring thought. But then there's a third reason that really particularly related to why Dudley and I were even in that room. And that was to create a portrait so that when these fourth graders, and in particular the fourth grade girls, came and walked through the halls and chambers of their own government, they could look up and see, honored, celebrated in a portrait, a woman of strength, a woman of relevance, a woman who had served her community. And the real enjoyment and smile, I speculated, was the thought that one of them might be encouraged and emboldened to follow suit, to do the same someday. So it's always dangerous to bring up smiles in art. There are some infamous smiles in art, and so I don't want to evoke them, but I do want to suggest that it is my hope that this portrait, in some small way, lives up to what was behind that smile I saw that day in October. So thank you, I hope you enjoy, and thank you for the privilege.
I feel like a hero, and if I fall off this platform, that's good. Amazing day for me, absolutely incredible day, and I thank you all so much. It's been amazing for several reasons, not the least of which is that this event was preceded by the vote of the Electoral College in this very room at that very table. And it brought to mind, as I voted for Hillary Clinton, how sad I was that that vote was not going to elect her as our president. And I think we're all struggling, trying to find ways to sort things out and figure out what we're going to do to take care of things in the best way that we can. And I want to talk about that for just a minute. First of all, there is, of course, the gift of money, which is important. And I'm thinking of, Bernie's $27 that added up and added up and added up, so that if you think you only have a little money and can send just a tad to the EPA, to the Environmental Defense Fund, or to Planned Parenthood, or to the ADL, or to the ACLU, or to the New Hampshire Women's Foundation, if you can just send a little bit, maybe once or twice, it will add up. And if we all do that, it will make a difference. So that's one thing. The other thing is that I truly believe that this incoming government is going to have to be challenged in many ways. Those challenges may very well come from people who will be working in the government, who will be deep in the bowels of the EPA, or the Defense Department, or the Pentagon. They will find the courage and the strength to stand out and to stand up and to say no when a directive comes down from above to something that they know is wrong. But they will need the power of the people behind them. They will need to know that we collectively are behind them, that we support them in doing this, because being a whistleblower is not an easy thing. So I charge you all with rousing the rabble. And in fact, one way you can do it, if you can't get to the million-person march in Washington on the 21st, the day after the inauguration, if you can't get there, maybe you can get to Market Square, where you will hear the leftist marching band leading people. There'll be people there with pots and pans. There'll be people there with pitchforks, and we will make our voices heard. I want to thank everybody who took part in this day and in making it possible, and particularly the Park Street Foundation, the generosity of so many people in this room. Very significant gifts were made, and I am so grateful to you for those. I'm grateful to Rennie and to Ray for their work. I guess I am glad that they thought of this. I'm grateful to Rich Harrington for his being the point person in Ray's office and making life a little easier for Becky. In 1679, King Charles II created the first council and presiding officer. At the time, the presiding officer was not the governor. He was called the president. And the first president of New England was none other than Joseph Dudley, my great-great-great-great-great-grandfather. And you can imagine what a joy it was to have him in this room with all of his hair as I sat opposite 3 different governors. That was in 1679. There were 279 years that passed between then and 1976, when I took my seat. There had not been one single woman, not one, who had been elected to the Governor's Council in the interim. I was elected in 1976, and things have changed since then. We now have had 3 female senators. We have had 2 female governors. We've had 3 additional members of the Executive Council, and they have all served well. 40 years ago, just about to this very day, by missing a week, I stood in this room and welcomed with the governor and the other newly elected members of the council as they came through and shook our hands and wished us well. And we had just been confirmed and were beginning our stretch in office. I served under 3 governors, always under the watchful eye of Joseph. I served under first Governor Thompson, and I was a little concerned about that because after all, he had thrown me out of his office, literally, 2 years before. But it turned out he was very courtly and invited me for breakfast at Bridges' house. We had pancakes, and we had a fairly stable relationship from then on. The second governor was Hugh Gallen, and under Hugh's administration, there were some significant judicial appointments made, and the Commission on the Status of Women flourished and became a more significant organization in this state. It has now become morphed into the New Hampshire Women's Foundation. And then lastly, the final governor was Governor Sununu, and I was worried about him too, because he had run against me for the Governor's Council 2 years before, and I had trounced him. But while we were campaigning against one another, we were in a debate in Dover, and he announced from the stage that Mrs. Dudley's white horse has gone over the hill. And that Christmas, a month later, Tom presented me with a silver bracelet that was engraved with the words, "Over the hill, John." As a councilor, there were several things that were importance to me, specifically the judicial appointments, and to be able to support the nomination of Linda Dalianis as the first woman on the Superior Court. She went on to become Chief Justice of the Superior Court. Then she was the first woman on the Supreme Court. She went on to be the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is where she is right now. Then also I supported Joe Netto from Durham. He went on to the Superior Court, became Chief Justice, went to the Supreme Court, became Chief Justice. Then there was David Souter. For reasons lost in the mists of time, I do not know why I voted against David Souter when he was nominated for the Superior Court. He went on to become Chief Justice of the Superior Court, and then he was nominated for the Supreme Court. And I saw the error of my ways and told him, David, I would vote for you for anything. And he, of course, was confirmed to the Supreme Court and became Chief Justice, and then he was nominated to the Supreme Court of the United States. And he invited me to come. And so, of course, I went to watch him as he was sworn in and for the reception at the White House afterwards. It was a high moment. Another really significant event, I feel, as my term as councilor, was the time that the Industrial Development Authority brought in a bond for Seabrook 2. Now, Seabrook 1 was well underway. Seabrook 2 was not complete by a long shot, and they brought in a funding mechanism for Seabrook 2. And I was able to convince my fellow councilors to vote against that. And Seabrook 2 sits as a hollow dome on the shore of the Atlantic right now, and it will never, never open. And that was something that I was very, very proud of. So last May, when Ray and Rennie asked me to lunch, and I've forgotten what the pretense was, but there was one. So we went out to lunch here in Concord, and Rennie immediately spilled forth this barrage of what was going to happen. I was going to have my portrait painted, it would hang in the State House, and Ray added, and you'll be an elector on November 19th, and it's all going to be... And at first I thought the whole thing is too much. I thought the portrait was pretentious and a little silly. And then Rennie said to me, there are 128 men on the walls of the State House. There are 6 women. And I thought about it. And I'm not here for me, but I am here for women. The women who have served New Hampshire well over the years, but unheralded. The women who are serving New Hampshire well, and the women who will serve New Hampshire well in the future. And I decided that I liked the idea. So now we're going to unveil the portrait, and then Paul and Pego are going to lead us in one rousing verse of "This Land Is Your Land," and the portrait is going to be unveiled. I have not seen it. It is going to be unveiled by the artist, Alistair, and the apple of my eye, Lauren. Where's Lauren? There she is. Lauren Dudley Hallett. The paint is still wet.
You have to sing this one. This land is yours.